They say Archer Avenue doesn't sleep, it waits. On cold nights when the fog rolls low and headlights blur in the mist, the road becomes a ribbon of silence leading past. Resurrection Cemetery, a place the locals avoid after midnight. Truckers, cops, and night shift workers all tell the same story, though none say it above a whisper. If you drive that stretch of road alone, between the willow trees and the stone gates, you might see her, a young woman in white, barefoot, walking the shoulder. Some slow down, some stop. A few never make it home. It all began on a freezing night in the winter of 1934. The O. Henry Ballroom, now long gone, was alive with jazz, music and laughter. Couples twirled beneath the golden chandeliers, shoes clicking against polished floors. Among them was a girl no one quite recognized. Her name was Mary, or at least that's what people later decided to call her. She was beautiful, with fair hair that caught the light like strands of gold and a white satin dress that shimmered as she moved. She danced with strangers, smiled easily, but there was something distant in her eyes, a sadness no one could explain. Around midnight, she stepped outside. Snow had begun to fall, thick and wet. Witnesses remembered she said something about needing to go home. She didn't have a coat. No one saw which way she went, only that she disappeared into the storm. The next morning, the police found a stretch of tire marks on Archer Avenue, skid tracks leading into a ditch near the cemetery fence. A man had reported swerving to avoid a girl in white the night before. They searched the area, but found nothing, just a torn piece of satin caught in the frozen gate. Days later, caretakers found something stranger. 2 handprints scorched into the iron bars of the Resurrection Cemetery gate, as though someone had gripped them hard enough to melt the metal. People tried to forget. But as the years went on, the sightings began. In 1936, a cab driver reported picking up a young woman in a white dress along Archer Avenue. She asked to be taken toward the ballroom, saying, "They're waiting for me." When the driver passed the cemetery, she vanished. He swore her seat was cold and damp, like she'd been standing in snow. Police dismissed it as superstition, but over the decades, more witnesses came forward. A trucker, a newlywed couple, a group of teenagers, all claimed they'd seen her, sometimes hitchhiking, sometimes standing silently at the cemetery gates. One man said he hit her with his car. He jumped out, panicked, looking for the girl. There was no body, no blood, just a faint outline of 2 bare footprints in the frost. Another man said she appeared in the passenger seat beside him as he drove past. Resurrection, whispering, "Home." When he looked again, she was gone. By the 1970s, Resurrection Mary had become an Illinois legend. Newspapers ran stories. Radio hosts dared listeners to drive Archer Avenue at midnight. Ghost hunters visited the cemetery, taking photos of pale figures behind the gates. But the locals, the ones who grew up nearby, don't laugh about it. They say if you pass the gates and smell lilacs when there are none around, you should turn back immediately. They say if you see her reflection in your rearview mirror, it's already too late. An old cemetery caretaker once told a reporter that every year, around the same time, usually near the anniversary of that snowstorm, he sees a young woman standing near the iron fence. "She doesn't move," he said. "She doesn't fade. She just stands there, like she's waiting for someone to open the gate." The O. Henry Ballroom burned down decades ago, but people still hear faint music drifting across Archer Avenue on quiet nights, big band music echoing through the trees, and sometimes passers-by say they see lights flickering between the tombstones, moving like dancers. But here's the thing that keeps this story alive. She changes. Every few years, witnesses describe her differently. Sometimes her dress looks newer, cleaner, like it's been replaced. Sometimes she seems older. Some even claim she speaks now, asking for a ride, asking for warmth. A few unlucky souls say she reached for them, her hand icy cold before disappearing. Would you stop if you saw her? Would you pull over for a barefoot woman in a white dress walking alone in the snow? Most people think they'd keep driving. But what if she turned her head and looked right at you? Her face pale, her eyes pleading? What if she whispered your name, even though you never told it to her? And if one night you drive down Archer Avenue and the radio cuts to static? If you smell lilacs, even in winter? and you feel something cold brush your shoulder. Don't look in the mirror, because those who do say they see her sitting in the back seat, staring back. And when you reach home and lock the door behind you, look at the window, because sometimes she follows. They say you can hear it before you see it. The echo of steel doors slamming shut somewhere deep inside the ruins. Long after midnight, the old Joliet prison looms like a stone skeleton on Collins Street, its towers jagged against the night sky. A place where the past never really died. For more than a century, this fortress of limestone held the worst of Illinois criminals, murderers, thieves, and men who'd long forgotten what sunlight felt like. But what remains there now is far darker than anything the wardens ever contained. The prison opened in 1858, built by convict labor from thick gray limestone quarry just a few yards away. It was meant to be escape-proof, a monument to discipline and punishment. The cold walls trapped sound, every cry, every footstep, and soon gained a reputation, even among guards, as the place where hope goes to die. Hundreds of executions, riots, and suicides marked its history. Entire cell blocks were burned during uprisings, leaving behind blackened corridors that smell faintly of ash even now. When it finally closed in 2002, people thought that would be the end. But the screams didn't stop. Local police still get calls, reports of lights flickering in the guard towers, of silhouettes pacing the walls. Paranormal investigators describe footsteps echoing through cell block E, where dozens of men were kept in solitary confinement. Others hear the rattling of unseen keys, the dragging of chains across the floors. And in the old death row wing, the air is said to drop suddenly, freezing cold. Even in July, some claim they've seen a man standing at the end of the corridor, his face covered by a black execution hood. He never moves, he never blinks. Then when they look away for a second, he's gone. One of the most disturbing legends comes from the women's wing, a small, long-abandoned section of the prison used briefly during the 1800s. Guards began reporting strange activity there, cells slamming shut on their own, lights cutting out, and an eerie humming sound, almost like someone singing a lullaby. When investigators set up recorders in the wing, they captured a woman's voice whispering over and over, "I didn't do it." No records of her ever existed. Yet every recording made in that part of the prison still catches the same faint voice. But the most feared spirit of all is known as the Warden. Visitors describe him as tall, wearing an old-fashioned uniform with brass buttons, his face shadowed beneath a peaked cap. He's often seen near the central rotunda, where condemned prisoners were once paraded before execution. People say he appears solid, as if alive, until you realize his feet don't touch the floor. He's said to walk the same patrol every night, stopping at the exact same cell, where the first recorded suicide took place in 1863. Some nights, if you're quiet, you can hear his cane tapping against the stone. Slow, deliberate, echoing long after you leave. During a renovation project in 2018, construction crews refused to return after several workers were locked inside a cell that had no functioning latch. One man swore he saw a figure standing on the catwalk above him, watching. When he shouted, the figure turned, and its face was nothing but a blur of light. Cameras caught static. No one spoke of it again. The restoration company still insists they lost several tools and cameras inside that wing that were never recovered. There's also the tale of Old Red, a nickname given by inmates to a guard rumored to have been murdered by prisoners during a 1901 riot. His ghost, they say, walks the perimeter, his lantern glowing faintly red, seen by passers-by even now. Truckers driving late at night have reported a flickering red light weaving through the towers, moving as though carried by a human hand. When police checked, the area was empty. The lantern light, however, was caught on a city security camera, though it flickered out when the guards went to investigate. The strangest part? The prison's limestone walls are believed to absorb energy. Paranormal researchers say that's why the screams never fade. They've been trapped in the stone, repeating themselves over and over for eternity. Some say that's why the air hums faintly near the solitary block, like a vibration just beneath hearing range. If you place your ear to the wall, it feels like a heartbeat, Guided tours now take visitors through the old cells and guard towers. Most leave uneasy but fine, but sometimes people faint. Sometimes they run. One woman claimed a cold hand grabbed her shoulder while she stood in an empty hallway. Another reported seeing faces reflected in the iron bars. Not her own. The security guards, they'll tell you they hear laughter echoing down the halls when no one else is there. They hear doors opening and closing, and footsteps following them out when they lock up at night. Would you go there? Would you walk those corridors where men were caged and broken, where death itself seemed to settle into the stone? The locals say if you visit after dark, never say the words, "I didn't do it," because that's when she answers back from the women's wing, still waiting for someone to believe her. And if you ever see that red lantern swinging near the wall, don't look away. They say that's old Red, still walking his shift, still watching the gates of the old Joliet prison, a place where the living and the dead have learned to coexist. Peoria, Illinois, the kind of quiet Midwestern city that seems safe, predictable, almost dull, the kind of place where every street corner has a diner, and every diner has the same waitress who's been serving coffee for 30 years. But if you dig through the yellowed pages of its history, buried under the smell of cornfields and river fog, you'll find something darker. A story whispered from porch to porch, a name spoken only when the wind dies down. The Axeman of Peoria. It began one hot summer night in 1911. The Illinois River steamed in the dark, heavy with humidity. Crickets were loud enough to fill the silence between the clanging of freight trains, and the air tasted faintly of oil and wood smoke. On a small street near the West Bluff, a grocer named Samuel Miller blew out his lantern and lay down beside his wife. He never woke up. When the sun rose, his wife was found stumbling into the street, her nightgown soaked in blood. Her screams brought the neighbors running, and within minutes, the little house on Green Street was crowded. What they found inside made even the sheriff turn away. Samuel had been struck twice in the head with an axe, clean, heavy blows. The weapon was left behind, glinting in the weak morning light. There were no fingerprints, no footprints, no sound heard in the night. The newspapers ate it up. Mysterious murder stuns Peoria. But just a week later, another headline appeared, and this one froze the whole town. Family slain in sleep, axe again used. It happened barely a mile away. The Baxter family, husband, wife, 2 children, all killed as they slept. No sign of forced entry, no robbery. The doors locked from the inside. The axe again left at the scene. The blood had soaked through the floorboards, seeping down into the earth below. That's when people started saying it wasn't just murder. It was ritual, something deliberate, something personal. The sheriff's department was overwhelmed. They dragged in drifters, railroad workers, even questioned a few of the victims' relatives. But the pattern kept spreading like fire. The attacks weren't random. They followed the railroad lines, the neighborhoods nearest the rail yards, the areas where travelers came and went. Wherever there was darkness and the echo of a train whistle, the Axeman wasn't far behind. And what terrified people most wasn't the brutality. It was the silence. Survivors, and there were only a few, claimed that they woke up not to the sound of an intruder, but to the absence of sound. The air itself felt wrong, thick, heavy, muffled. One woman said she woke to find a tall shadow standing at the foot of her bed. Motionless, she couldn't see his face, only his hands, gripping the axe like it was part of him. Then she blacked out. When she woke, she was lying on the porch, blood on her face, her husband dead beside her. The killing stretched on for months. From Peoria Heights to Adams Street, from tiny farmhouses to boarding homes downtown. Always the same weapon, always left behind, and always the same eerie calm before dawn. In late August, a preacher from Chicago arrived in town. He claimed he could chase the devil from Peoria. Townsfolk filled the church that night. He spoke of curses, vengeance, of restless spirits that clung to the living. But as he preached, a storm rolled in, thunder shaking the stained glass windows. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the entire church went dark. When they came back on, the preacher was standing at the pulpit, staring at the door, pale as bone. Someone had left a hatchet there, a single drop of blood on its blade. After that, people stopped talking about God and started talking about survival. Men sat on their porches with rifles. Women nailed boards over windows. Children weren't allowed to play outside after sunset. Still, the murders didn't stop. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it ended. September came. The nights grew colder. The papers went silent. No new killings. No new signs. The sheriff told the town it was over, that maybe the killer had been scared off. But no one believed him. They said the Axeman had just gone quiet. Years passed. The story became folklore. The old houses where the murders happened were torn down or rebuilt. People forgot or pretended to. But every few years, something strange would happen. A stray report of a door found open in the night. An axe missing from a tool shed. A single muddy footprint on a back porch. Then came 1934. A man walking home from a factory shift near the River E claimed to see someone standing under a street lamp, tall, thin, wearing an old fedora, holding something in one hand. The man waved, thinking it was a friend. The figure didn't move. He said later that it looked like the stranger was smiling. Then lightning flashed, and the figure was gone. By the 1950s, people called him a myth. Kids dared each other to spend the night in the old West Bluff neighborhood. Couples parked near the river, waiting for the Axeman's light, a pale, swinging glow that locals swore they saw moving between the trees. And in the 1970s, a construction crew digging near the moor river found something they couldn't explain. A set of rusted iron, tools buried deep in the soil, and among them the head of an axe. Still sharp, the county kept it quiet, but those who saw it said the metal looked new, too new to have been buried for 60 years. Even now, the story hasn't died. Those who live near the edge of Peoria say that on windless nights, you can still hear it, the faint, rhythmic sound of steel tapping against wood. Some say it's just old pipes beneath the ground. Others swear it's the Axeman sharpening his blade, waiting for someone to leave their back door unlocked. And maybe that's why Peoria never really sleeps. The night feels heavier there, thicker somehow, as if the air itself remembers what happened. The people who live there don't talk about it much, but every now and then, when the lights flicker or the wind hits just right, they glance toward their doors, because they know the Axeman of Peoria was never caught, and maybe, just maybe, he never left. They call it one of the most haunted places in America. The McPike Mansion, a crumbling, red brick giant that looms over the town of Alton, Illinois, like a scar that refuses to fade. If you drive down Seminary Street at night, you'll see it sitting on the hill, surrounded by ancient trees and an iron fence that looks older than time itself. Some say the house is sleeping. Others say it's listening. It was built in 1869 by Henry Guest McPike, a respected businessman, horticulturalist, and former mayor of Alton. Back then, it was a thing of beauty. 30 rooms, sweeping staircases, carved banisters, and hand-blown stained glass that caught the morning sun. Henry filled it with his family, his books, and the scent of fresh grapes from his vineyard. But the mansion's beauty didn't last. They say it began the day his wife fell ill. No one knew what it was. Fever, infection, maybe something worse. The doctors came and went. The curtains stayed drawn. And Henry McPike, once the pride of Alton, stopped leaving his home. When his wife died, he shut himself inside that mansion and never spoke of her again. The staff left one by one. The vines overtook the gardens, and the house began to change. Neighbors whispered that at night they could see lights flickering through the windows, even after the gas lamps were gone. Some said they heard a woman crying from the second floor. Others swore they saw her figure standing on the balcony, pale as moonlight, staring down toward the street. When Henry died, the mansion passed through different owners, each one staying shorter than the last. The groundskeeper in the 1920s claimed that every morning he'd find muddy footprints on the grand staircase, but never any signs of forced entry. The police came, checked every door, every window. They found nothing, but the footprints continued. And then, one morning, The groundskeeper was gone too. His tools were found at the base of the stairs. His boots, still muddy, pointing toward the basement door. By the 1950s, the mansion was falling apart. Roof caved in, paint peeling, windows shattered. Kids dared each other to sneak inside. They said the air inside was thick, damp and cold, colder than outside. Even in summer, one boy swore he saw a woman standing in the foyer mirror, even though no one else was there. Another said he heard breathing, slow, shallow breathing, coming from the wine cellar below the house. When police searched it, they found rows of old barrels and rusted wine racks. But one room was different. Its door was made of thick oak, sealed from the outside. Inside, there were scorch marks on the walls, as though something had burned long ago. The floor was covered in melted wax, dozens, maybe hundreds, of candle drips. And carved into the stone were strange symbols. Symbols no one could explain. The city condemned the building soon after, but locals say the house didn't stay quiet. During storms, lightning would strike the grounds more often than anywhere else in Alton. Travelers passing by said they saw the windows glowing faint red, like coals beneath ash. Some even said they saw movement inside, a shape pacing the second floor, long after the place was boarded up. In the late 1990s, a couple bought the property hoping to restore it. They thought the ghost stories were just old rumors, perfect for drawing tourists. But that first night, as they unloaded boxes into the foyer, the wife froze. She said she felt someone brush past her shoulder, like a rush of cold air, and she heard a whisper, so close to her ear it made her knees buckle. Leave it, buried. They thought it was a trick of the wind, until the following morning when they found their tools. A hammer, a chisel and a pry bar, laid neatly on the kitchen counter, arranged in the shape of a cross. Still, they pressed on. They began renovations, peeling back old wallpaper, scraping at plaster, replacing beams. And that's when they found it, behind a rotting wall on the second floor. A narrow alcove sealed with bricks. Inside was a small wooden box, wrapped in linen, bound with wire. The couple brought it downstairs, but when they tried to open it, the lights flickered, and the husband's nose started to bleed. The box slipped from his hands, hit the floor, and burst open. Inside were human teeth, dozens of them, yellowed, cracked, and still embedded in what looked like pieces of bone. After that, the wife refused to stay another night. She left and never returned. The husband tried to continue the restoration alone, but he started to lose time. Hours gone from his memory, he'd wake up in different rooms, his clothes covered in dust, his hands shaking. He began to see a woman, always at the edge of his vision, sometimes in the hall mirror, sometimes at the top of the stairs, always watching. Then one day he disappeared. Police found his truck parked outside, keys still in the ignition. The house was empty except for a single lantern flickering in the basement. On the wall, written in soot, were the words, "You brought her back." Since then, the McPike mansion has become a legend. Paranormal investigators, psychics, thrill seekers, they all come, trying to record her voice, catch her shadow, prove she's real. Some say they have. EVP recordings caught a faint woman's voice whispering names. Cameras malfunction inside, batteries drain, and more than one visitor claims they've seen a figure standing behind them in photographs, tall with hollow eyes. Locals say that's Mrs. McPike, still bound to the home her husband couldn't save her from. But others think something else was buried beneath that house. Something older, something darker. The burned cellar, the sealed door, the teeth in the box. They weren't hers. They were offerings, a ritual gone wrong. And maybe that's why the mansion still breathes when the wind dies down. Why the vines on its walls never die, even in winter. Why some nights, if you listen carefully, you can hear a woman humming through the cracked glass, a soft, broken melody echoing from the second floor. If you ever find yourself in Alton, drive by the McPike mansion after midnight. Stop at the gate, cut your headlights, look toward the top window, the one with the shattered glass. If the stories are true, she'll be looking back at you,